Welcome to the webinar of the International Association for Public Participation in Indonesia under the theme of Multi-Stakeholder Participation in Green Investment and its Impact on Labor Absorption in the Green Recovery Framework. Featured today, the Ministry of National Development Planning, Head of Bappenas, Bapak Suharso Monoarfa. The Chair of the Interparliamentary Cooperation Committee, Dr. Haji Fadli M.Sc, His Excellency Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia, Dr. Peter Schoof, Deputy of Economic Affairs of the Ministry of National Development Planning or Bappenas, Ibu Amalia A. Widyasanti, PhD, Director of Environment of the National Development Planning Agency, Bapak Insinyur Medrelzam M. Prof. Econ, PhD, CEO of PT Permodalan BMT Ventura, Bapak Insinyur Haji Saad Suharto Amjad, the Director of the Finance and Operation of PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur Persero, Bapak Darwin Trisna Jaya Winata, Chair of IAP2 Indonesia, Bapak Aldi Muhammad Alizar, Director Executive of Plan International Indonesia, Ibu Dini Widyastuti. Let us now warmly welcome our MC today, Ibu Ida Ayu Prasasti. Good afternoon and welcome to all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen to the webinar of IAP2 Indonesia, Multi-Stakeholders Participation in Labor Absorption in the Framework of Green Recovery. I hope you all stay safe and healthy today. My name is Ida Ayu Prasasti, who will be your MC today until the end of this event. And before we start with the session, let us now greet our special guests and speakers who have joined us today. The first one, Your Excellency, Minister of the PPN or Head of Bappenas, Bapak Suharso Monoarfa. Your Excellency already joined us today. The Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia, His Excellency Dr. Peter Schoof. Head of BKSAP or Interparliamentary Cooperation of the Parliament, Bapak Dr. Haji Fadli M.Sc, Deputy of Economic Affairs of the Bappenas, Ibu Amalia Adininggar Widyasanti, ST, M.Sim, PhD, Director of Environment of the Bappenas, Bapak Insinyur Medrelzam M. Prof. Econ, PhD. Already joined with us, the CEO of PT Permodalan BMT Ventura, Bapak Insinyur Haji Saad Suharto Amjad, and Director of Finance and Operation of PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur Persero, Bapak Darwin Trisna Jaya, Chairman Bapak Alwin Syaruzad, and Ibu Dini Widyastuti. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the International Association for Public Participation of IAP2 Indonesia is an association of international membership that promotes and increases public participation or engagement, which merges individuals, government, and other entities to influence public interests all around the world. IAP2 Indonesia has been routinely conducting campaigns on public participation both online and offline. For those of you who are interested, you can join our social media account that is already displayed on your screen to get most updated and actual information on the public participation events held by IAP2 Indonesia. Today's webinar is one of the manifestations of IAP2 Indonesia's commitment to strengthen the recovery efforts in post-COVID era. In addition, this webinar is also a form of strategic cooperation between IAP2 Indonesia with its partner to safeguard the green investment issue that gives impacts on the absorption of labors in green recovery framework. Our today's webinar can also be enjoyed through YouTube channel, so don't hesitate to open the YouTube channel and share it to your colleagues. You also have interpretation features that you can activate by activating it on the bottom right of your Zoom screen, and you will have English and Indonesian channels. To all the speakers, please kindly choose only one channel of languages in accordance with the language you will use in order to prevent any technical problems during the translation process. Kindly also fill out the attendance list that will be provided by the committee later on. Without further ado, to open our today's event, let us listen to the opening remark Ambassador of Germany for Indonesia, His Excellency Dr. Peter Schoof, who will be delivered in English. So, to all of you ladies and gentlemen who will need the translation services, kindly activate the Indonesian interpretation channel to listen to the opening remark by the Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we will open the webinar, which led by Ambassador of Germany for Indonesia, His Excellency Dr. Peter Schoof. The time is yours.
His Excellency Minister of Bappenas, Dr. Monoarfa, His Excellency Dr. Fadli, who hopefully can join us later, my dear co-panelists, dear audience, Salamat Sore. It gives me great pleasure to be with you today, and I thank you for inviting me. I hope that I can be heard, that the line is all right. I had a problem with my Wi-Fi until some time ago, but it seems to be fixed. Unless I hear from you, I will just address you as planned. Dear audience, at present the coronavirus is driving our agenda all over worldwide. We are still struggling big time in order to contain the virus. We have some light at the horizon with the development and licensing of the first vaccines all over in various regions in the world. But we know that if we are honest with ourselves, that in spite of the vaccines that are coming, we will still need in all our countries, and this is true for my country, Germany, as well as for Indonesia, we will still need for a considerable time to practice our life a little bit different as we are used to it. What we hope is a new normal will still take time, and even if we are starting the vaccination, we will still all have to observe and respect the hygienic measures and the social distancing in order to contain the spread of the virus. We have seen in the world, and this is coming right to the heart of the topic of today's webinar, which is participation in green investment that has an impact on labor absorption, green jobs creation in the framework of the green recovery. We have seen in various parts of the world unprecedented stimulus packages for economic recovery. We have seen this in Indonesia. We have seen this in the United States. If you think about Europe, my continent, if you add everything together, you can look at a figure of 1.7 trillion euros. I don't even want to know. My screen would not be enough to express all this amount in rupiah, I think. It is an enormous amount of money that we are trying to inject into our economies in order to keep our economies going, to keep our jobs in place, to prevent that companies and corporations have to lay off workers and so on. But and this brings me now to the core of our concern and of the topic of today's webinar, is that we know, if we are really looking at the situation and at the roots and causes of the situation honestly, that the way the virus has originated and the way it spreads in the world, there is also, it has to do with the world, with the way we lived in this globalized world, and with various unsustainable practices that we allow to live during the time. So, from our point of view in Europe and in Germany, the very important thing that we have to look at now is, when we look at the stimulus packages, we have to see how we can build back better, which is, I think, what also I'm very happy what also Bappenas has embraced as an idea. And we are fully, as Germany and as Europe, behind you, and a number of our member states, and Germany in particular, have a very close cooperation with Indonesia in this regard. As far as the stimuli packages in Europe and in Germany are concerned, if you look at them, you will find an important focus on green investments in future technologies. and in ways to contribute to the mitigation of climate change. In short, green growth with green jobs. And this is all the more important as we look this year with the COP26 in Glasgow later this year at the commitments of the Paris Agreement on the protection of our climate. And this is our stimulus package has been largely guided by those commitments. So we are trying to keep our economies going, but at the same time, we are trying to also inject a transformative dimension into the stimulus packages and try to see to it that we can come back to a way of living which is more sustainable and greener. Now, I will give you a couple of points where I think the green agenda is particularly pertinent. We have in Europe since 1990, of course, tried to embark on the decarbonizing of the transport sector, for example, or even reducing emissions there. What we have done now is something very important and also which has been quite, well, not easy domestically, because we have looked at stimuli to be given to the automotive industry, and you know how important the automotive industry is for Germans. It is in a way the heart of our industrial success. But we have reduced or limited the stimuli to give an impulse to electric mobility. We have not given impulse to the conventional combustion engine cars. And this is an important sign that we have understood that there has to be now a transition to climate neutrality also in the carbon sector. As I said already before, we try to also look at other issues. We support, for example, the use of hydrogen as a key technology to decarbonizing the industrial sector, for example, also the automotive industry. We are trying to decarbonize the building sector, which is a very big challenge. You know that although Indonesia and Germany are living in different climate zones, we have to heat our homes about 9 months per year, and you have to aircon your homes 12 months a year. So this requires a lot of effort, and although it's cold at our place and warm here, we face very, very similar challenges. And the energy efficiency agenda is a very important contribution to the decarbonization and to climate neutrality. And so I think both Indonesia and also Germany, we should continue to compare notes on this. As far as the stimulus package that was adopted last summer in Germany is concerned, there are about 40 billion euros just going into ecological modernization. The European Green Deal, which is the central motto of the European Commission, you are aware of. Well, there's a lot to be done. I won't hide it, and we're trying to live up to our commitments. But of course, everybody, and Indonesia is not alone in this, struggles, of course, with these commitments and has to try to put them into place in a way which also remains dynamic for the economy. But I mean, we are very proud in 2020 in Europe, the EU will for the first time, it will increase its share of renewables from solar, wind, and hydrogen and biomass to 38%. And it will be the first time where we are overtaking the share of fossil fuels, which will be at 37%. So that's a very important moment for us. We are, of course, also, we have, of course, decided at the EU to increase the EU emission reduction target for the year 2030, which was originally 40% as compared to 1990. We have now committed to reduce it to 55% compared to 1990, which is an ambitious update of the EU's commitment under the Paris Agreement. But when we calculated our path to climate neutrality in 2050, there was no other choice. We had to be bolder than we had been in the past. In our efforts to tackle the economic impact of COVID-19, we concentrate on building better and greener economies. And we do this not only at home, but we also try to support the global south, because we know that only worldwide intersectoral, intergovernmental action with the participation of the private sector, NGOs, scientists, academia, and so on will do the job. And also we are aware in Europe that although we are, per capita, a big emitter of greenhouse gases still, which we're trying to redress, but all in all, Europe only accounts to 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and so there is no other way than to work together and engage the global south. I think what is important at this moment is that when everybody tries to look at growth, that we avoid any rollback of existing environmental regulations and standards, which would undo our achievements over the recent years. That is why we are of the opinion that unconditional subsidies to fossil fuel intensive infrastructure and emission-intensive industries such as energies, in the energy sector, for example, should be discontinued, and instead the subsidies should go into renewable energies. Now, some might think that investments in renewable energies such as coal are a fast and a convenient way to stimulate the economy and also ensure energy security. It is our strong belief that from both an economic and a climate political perspective, such investments will hinder our common efforts to reach the effort to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees. And also more and more econometric studies show that actually the coal has, on the long run, I say this in all conscience, no future, because the world is turning greener and fossil fuels will be at some point phased out. And I think this will take time, and for everybody the situation is different. But I think as strategic decision makers, governments should today, and at least this is our point of view in Germany, they should understand also the economic reality, because the big players, if you look at also what comes from Washington now with the new Biden administration, what China is doing, the course India has embarked on, there is a new wind now, and wind is a renewable energy also for our minds, so we should understand it that way. I think in Indonesia it is also, very relevant, because I follow as an outsider. I like to live very much in this country, and I love this country with all my heart. But every time I'm struck by the way this country is hit by natural disasters. And I think there is a consensus among politicians and academics that a lot of these disasters and the way they have become severer and severer year by year, a lot of this also has to do with environmental and climate issues, which we all have to address. So we think our approach is now in our bilateral relations that we are there as Germany to help Indonesia to focus on boosting investments and innovations in green technologies, creating new green jobs and accelerated climate action. Now, we are aware of this sometime substantiated equation that says that green growth jeopardizes jobs. I can only tell you from our experience in Europe, if we look at the construction sector and all the manpower, we will need to have our people, have skilled people, take care on ensuring buildings which absorb the energy, which are energy efficient, which work with new materials, innovative materials. If we look at the transport sector, where all of us are committed to move to electromobility, which entails the construction of batteries, which pertains to the establishment of new loading stations, many new vectors of innovation. And of course, if we look finally the third sector at the energy sector, our statistical evidence in Germany shows that the renewable energies in some have actually created millions of jobs. So the equation to say that turning to green jobs jeopardizes jobs, in our view, is not right. We think there is a win-win situation where we can do things to protect our planet on the one hand, and also to maintain sustainable growth. And maintaining sustainable growth means, of course, that we have to look and invest into circular models of doing business more and more. And I'm very happy to see, and I'm very proud that we as Germans, with our development bank, KfW, for example, are for example, involved heavily with hundreds of millions of dollars in waste to energy projects here. I think there are many ways where you can circulate waste and both protect the environment as well as have raw materials and impulse and energy for your economic activities. We look at many other sectors where circular business models are now practiced. There are many young people, especially in our universities, startups, which give a great contribution to that. And this is where our efforts should go. Let me make one last point because I'm too long as usual. We look at Indonesia in this agenda as a strategic partner. And why do I say this? Next year, Indonesia will, for the first time, chair the G20, the group of G20, which are the 20 most powerful and influential nations in the world. The G20 agenda encompasses a broad range of topics, but one of the core topics, of course, is the protection of the environment and climate change. And we are looking forward to your leadership as Indonesia on this agenda to show us new ways of working together multilaterally in the world. And the important thing is that at the same time, 2022, when Indonesia is going to chair the G20, Germany is going to chair the G7. And what my wish as ambassador also for our bilateral relations would be that the two chairs of the G20 and the G7 really use this opportunity to work together, to contribute, to find new solutions, to build back better and have a better world for our children and grandchildren. I leave it there. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, His Excellency Dr. Peter Schoof, for the opening remarks. Hope we can work together within the Green Recovery Strategic Framework in this new normals era, through up and downs together for the betterment for both countries and the world.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants who have joined us today, we'd like to inform you that there is no attendance list on our webinar today, but there will be an automatic system that will record your attendance and which will send you the certificate 7 days after this event. We would like to kindly remind you that you can access this event through YouTube link that we have already shown in the beginning. Feel free to share the YouTube link to your colleagues. We also have the Q&A session and mode on the Zoom screen that you can use to have a discussion with our speakers that will join us during the discussion session. Ladies and gentlemen, for the next one, we'll return to the opening remark from the Parliament that will be delivered by the Chair of BKSAP or Interparliamentary Cooperation Committee, Bapak Fadli Zon, SS M.Sc. To Bapak Fadli Zon, the floor is yours, sir. Your Excellency, Bapak Suharso Monoarfa, Deputy of Economic Affairs of the Bappenas, Ibu Amalia Adininggar Widiasanti, Director of Environment Affairs of the Bappenas, Bapak Insinyur Medrilzam, President Director of PT Medco Energy International, Bapak Hilmi Panigoro, and Bapak Aldi Muhammad Alizar from IAP2. All distinguished participants, peace be upon you. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you all, especially to the IAP2 as the organizers of our today's webinar under the theme of Green Recovery, which is associated with the absorption of labor force for green recovery. My apologies because I'm currently in Manunging in Bangka Island. So we are not having really good signal, but now it has become much better. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, the green economic growth is a coordinated effort that consists of economic growth, environmental sustainability, decrease of poverty, and social engagement that are promoted through the utilization of global resources in sustainable manner. And of course, I and we, BKSAP, are also concerned with this, and therefore we truly appreciate this webinar to serve as a discussion space to formulate the proper cooperation between government and other stakeholders, including private sector, civil society, academics, in the implementation of green investment. In addition, this should also serve as a medium to exchange information to identify the challenges found in the integration efforts of green economy into green jobs and green investment mechanisms. The measures to tackle climate change is part of the point 13 within the 17 SDGs that have been agreed on by world leaders, including Indonesia, to end poverty, to reduce gap, and to protect the environment. And SDGs consist of 17 goals, which are elaborated into 169 targets, which we hope to achieve by 2030. So basically, 2020 and 2030 should be a decade of action that we should carry out as best as possible. But as we know, there has been other issues occurred, especially due to the pandemic since 2020. However, on the other hand, we also found out that the pandemic itself can also serve as a momentum for us to shift toward green growth or eco-friendly economy to support the achievement of our SDGs targets, especially the ones associated with climate change. This could serve as momentum for us to seriously greening our Earth while maintaining the economic growth. Since last October of 2020, we, including me, we were involved in leading the focus group discussions in our BKSAP or Interparliamentary Cooperation Committee, and we held last one a couple months ago in Bogor under the theme of green growth and green economy, under which we collaborated with our international partners, and also which included Organization for Economic and Development or OECD, as well as for Foundation for Democracy, as well as other organizations. In BKSAP or Interparliamentary Committee Cooperation, we are very much concerned with SDGs, and to this extent, so far Indonesia has been committed to reducing its carbon emission, and I believe His Excellency Germany Ambassador has already mentioned well, which had been also mentioned based on Germany's experiences as well as other developed countries' experiences. This commitment was manifested in form of registration to the nationally determined contribution to the international commitment as our efforts to implement Paris Agreement. We promised to reduce a lot of percentage of our greenhouse emission in normal situation and 45% with international support by 2030. And of course, we hope to make sure that all policies taken to carry out this target should be inclusive, science-based, and environment and pro-environment. Since this will affect significantly the community, we have to develop policy-making process together with the community, and I believe we, the Parliament, play significant roles, especially as the legislator, supervision, and budgeting. The implementation of green recovery will serve as the mover of the world economic transformation, and Indonesia will keep implementing its commitment to reduce the carbon emission to achieve the climate resilient nation. Green recovery is associated with the reduction of global climate change, which will also impact the economy of various countries. Through this webinar organized by IAP2 Indonesia this afternoon, I really hope that we could have come up with solutions to mainstream and to provide incentives for multi-stakeholders initiative or partnership to optimize our green economic growth and absorption of labor force as part of national sustainable development, as well as to accelerate the achievement of our SDGs targets. And we also hope to receive a lot of inputs for the Parliament through our committee, and all the results of today's webinar will serve as good inputs for us. Once again, I congratulate you, and I wish you a good discussion today. Peace be upon you, and thank you.
So it is inclusive, based on science and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take a look together, and we'll take a picture first. I would like all of the special guests and the speakers to cooperate with us and turn on their cameras and pose as directed for our group.
Saya
I'll
ulang
start. One,
hitungannya.
two,
1,
three.
2, 3.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now go into the discussion session for today. Thank you for the speakers. Thank you for our special guest, Fadli, for taking this picture with us together. This session will be led by our moderator, Ms. Dini Widyasuti. However, before we go into the discussion, please make sure that you are in the correct language for the interpreting feature so that you can hear all of the discussions that we have today. Good afternoon, Ms. Dini. Hi, good afternoon, Ms. Sasti. How are you doing? I'm doing well, thank you. And you? Yes, I'm doing very well. I hope everyone's doing well today. Now, I'd like to welcome you to moderate this session with the speakers. And of course, we'll have the Q&A session with the participants of today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And now, we're going into the session where we have presentations from speakers, and then it will be followed by a discussion. So today we have various speakers that are extraordinary here, and they'll be talking about the topic of our webinar, which is the participation of various parties in green recovery and employment. Now, before we start, we'll start with the speakers here, Ms. Amelia, or Ms. Winnie, who is Deputy of Economics under Bapanas. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon. And we also have Mr. Medruzam, who is PhD. He is the Director of Environment under Bapanas. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to you too, Mr. Medruzam. And now we also have Mr. Saad Suharso Amjad, who is the CEO of PT Permodalan BMT Ventura. Good afternoon. Thank you for including me in this webinar today. And finally, last but not least, good afternoon, Mr. Darwin Trisna Jayawinata, the Financial and Operational Director of PT Sarana Multi-Infrastructure. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, Ms. Dini. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So to the speakers, each of you has 10 minutes for your presentation, and 2 minutes before that time ends, I will give you a reminder, and at the end, I will warn you that your time is up. So after we have the presentation, we'll have a discussion, and some of you here may want to ask questions, and you can ask these questions in the Q&A session. So you can tell us your name and what region you're from. we would like to know who is here asking questions. This is a very interesting topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the growth of green economy, this is something that is about momentum. We would like to build back better after this pandemic. So we hope that economic growth will be spurred in Indonesia, and it will be stronger, green, inclusive, both socially as well as environmentally. Now, it's not only the government who takes part, but it's also the public and the private sector. And so, for our first presentation, we have the CEO of BMT Ventura, Mr. Saad Suharto Amjad. Mr. Saad Suharto Amjad is currently the CEO of PBMT Ventura, and he was previously the first commissioner of PT Barakah Nusantara, and prior to that, he was on the CHISFAT board, or the Center of Islamic Studies, Economics and Development. In 2014 to 2018, he was the CEO of PBMT Ventures Limited in Singapore. To Mr. Saad Suharto Amjad, the time is yours. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum. Peace be with everyone. To IAP2, to the distinguished ladies and gentlemen and speakers, thank God Almighty, I've been afforded the opportunity to deliver this presentation on my company and how we develop a productive family. So I'm involved in microfinance, and this is very closely related to how I live. In the beginning, when I first attempted to be an entrepreneur, I actually sold kerupuk, or Indonesian chips. And so I tried to take a look at who was at the market, who could process it. I had to go to the terminal. It was to Yogyakarta at that time in 1990. So I feel that I have a good understanding of those who run micro businesses because that is part of my life. In 1992, I developed Baitum BMT Tamwil, and now the assets have reached 200 billion with 49 offices. So we understand that those who run micro businesses are ready to work hard. They're people who are generally very honest and earnest, and they are able to work on their own with their own finances and assistance. Now in the next slide, we can see that for this presentation, I'd like to first take a look at what is BMT, what is the business model, what have we done, and what would we like to achieve in the future, and where can we collaborate. Taking a look at the next slide, in general, the management of BMT takes a look at society as a whole, and we see that the problem is that there isn't a saving culture. There's also not a culture of planning expenditures or budgeting. And there wasn't an organization at that time who was there to provide access to them in accordance to the needs of the micro business community in Indonesia. That is why we developed an organization, and we first taught people to save money. And so we had an assessment. We tried to take a look at the payments they were making. We tried to understand their character. We tried to understand their capacity for repayment, and so on. But in addition to this, we have something that is very important, that saving had broken this mindset that they would always be poor. The people involved in micro businesses are simple. They simply see that being poor is because they can't save. So, it doesn't matter how small their savings is. It's still able to break the idea in their minds that they are poor. And so they would then be ready for other treatments. And so we can see this from the red dot. We have provided them with grants. We provided them with non-commercial financing. And then they could go to the yellow dot, where this is completely a business-minded. And we use both with a social character. And then we go into the business character in the next or the third phase. So with these three, we hope that they can continue to develop, to stand on their own 2 feet, to reach a level of prosperity with our assistance that will lead them to being bankable. So for BMT Tamwil, or Baitul Mal Wat Tamwil, this is a house of social and business. And so we have a business chamber as well, which we call Baitul Mal Tamwil. This is based on the system of a cooperative. And with the social nature, of course, we receive funds based on charity. We also have grants. Now, this kind of charity could include zakah, infaq, sadaqah, and so on. And so, as we showed in the red dot and the yellow dot before, we have this system. However, we also receive funds that are business-oriented, from savings, from deposits, and from Sharia banks and many other parties. And we channel this to these businesses. It could be ijaro, it could be musharaka. There are various other types of businesses based on the Sharia ideals. So from that time until 1992, we had to undergo assessment to pass the Islamic assessment. So we'll take a look at this on the next slide. Now for BMT Indonesia, if we take a look at the next slide, at this time, we have many that have passed standards. So we have 322 that have passed these economic finance standards. So in September 2020, there were 17 billion assets, with a number of members totaling 7,700,000 something. And these are people who have been provided with finances so that they can achieve a level of business that they had not before. So if we take a look at the sector, then the first is agriculture, where it is 18.52%. And we see that the informal sector is all of the micro business sector, such as those in markets and so on. They're included here at 53%. Now, for BMT, we have been able to position ourselves as a financial solution for the 53% of informal sector workers. They have not been served by the banking sector. So the cooperatives in Indonesia has shown that these individuals are able to be part of financial inclusion, and BMT has provided education on savings to its members. This is shown by the existence of savings accounts under our members' names. And we have also productive financing. The BMT products have been adjusted to the needs of these micro communities. that is consistent with their culture as well as their business. They have daily cash flow, and their installments as well can be daily. But for those who are in industry, for example, those in Tasik, who are able to, let's say, receive some money on every Thursday, then we can have a weekly system set up for them. So here, if we take a look at Java and the treatment there, it's the market treatment that we have. So what we have is called yarning. And this is for different people, it's different things. For example, those who are farming corn is different from those who are involved in aquaculture for shrimp, because the payment systems are different. Mr. Saad, you have 2 more minutes. So let's take a look at the final slide. We would like to improve financing to agriculture and small industry. BMT would also like to improve services to these sectors by developing specific schemes or treatments for financing that are in accordance with their needs. And then we can be closer to our members. We invite all of you here today to, together with us, help alleviate poverty with donations, with grants, with infaq, with social fund and crowdfunding. And at this opportunity, we hope that you can provide financing and funding that is productive with a profit-sharing scheme for the agricultural sector as well as small industry. I hope that this has been beneficial for you. Thank you for this opportunity. Assalamualaikum. Peace be with you all. Wassalamualaikum. Peace be with you too. This is very interesting, Mr. Saad. So I took note of your presentation. So BMT Ventura has shown its character. We've seen its green economy focus. And Mr. Fadli Zone has said that this is supposed to be inclusive socially. And so we see that with the informal sector, with the farmers that you have 7.7 million, right? That's extraordinary. And it's a focus on agriculture. So if we're taking a look at green economy, of course, we're talking about agriculture, right? And we take a look at the process, the industrial processes in those sectors. I'm sure that there are many questions from the participants who have heard your presentation. But before we get to that, we'll hear from someone else in the private sector. Now I'd like to take a look at the second speaker. The presentation will be provided by the Director of Operational and Finance. We have Mr. Darwin Trisna Jayawinata. Mr. Darwin is the Director of PTSME. That's what I usually refer to it as. And he is responsible for finance and operations. He is responsible for leading the operations of the company, starting from the accounting, the treasury, the fundraising, as well as investor relations, asset management, and investments, as well as general support and technology and information. Mr. Darwin has also developed a sustainable unit in his company that promotes a renewable energy focus, efficient energy, and financing towards climate change. And he now has brought this company into being an accredited company for Green Climate Funds, or GCF. And this is the first in Southeast Asia that has been accredited by GCF and has partnerships with so many multilateral institutions as well as bilateral institutions and financing climate change funds. So this is to help with sustainable or green financing in renewable energy. So we have hydro energy, we have solar energy, we have biomass energy, we have public transportation in cities, the provision of drinking water, and so on. So we have over 20 projects for renewable energies and 4 financings of exploration and exploitation of geothermal energy by this company. So Mr. Darwin, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ms. Dini, for the introduction. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be with everyone, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First, I'd like to thank you for the invitation that has been extended to us to deliver this presentation and to share about our initiatives within the context of green development and its relation to absorbing the labor force and helping the national economy. From PTSME, we are a financial company and we help with infrastructure. So the scope of our activities is in financing and investment for infrastructure projects that are medium to large scale. Let's start with my presentation. Let's take a look at the next slide. So this is an introduction from us with regard to our company. So we are a non-bank organization that was established by the government and is 100% owned by the government. So our main activities, as seen from this presentation, is financing and investment, where we have various activities that are very similar to banks. However, our activities are more flexible than banks in the use of its capital and in other financing that is relatively thematic, such as Sharia financing and also financing that we do perhaps with assignment from the government to regional governments. We also have certain themes for financing, such as sustainable financing, because we realize that in the future, the need for development must be in line with sustainable development, and that is what we are focused on. The sectors that we cover are mostly under infrastructure, and we're also involved in financing and investing in social infrastructure, such as hospitals, tourist areas, and several other facilities that are included as social infrastructure. By the end of 2020, we have recorded an increase in assets that is substantial. It has reached 1 trillion. And throughout our time in operation, our financial performance has been very good. We've always had a good assessment results from the auditors. And so this is our capital to continue developing and creating better change in Indonesia. In the next slide, I'll take a look at the initiatives that we've done. Let's take a look at the next slide. So this is what we've done in this time. We can see that from financing, we have some flexibility. Our role here is to complete what other financial institutions, such as banks and other funding consortiums, have been able to provide. We are there in the gap, filling the gap and working together with them for green development in Indonesia. We are also owned 100% by the Indonesian government. So this is incredible capital for us to continue in maintaining our position and in asking other people to cooperate with us. This gives us a certain position. So we are one of the first entities in Southeast Asia that has been accredited by the Green Climate Fund, which is one of the global commitment funding organizations for climate change. We have the common commitment after the Paris Agreement to do this. And we've always been a promoter of these activities, and we've sponsored different activities for the implementation of social and environmental efforts. And so we were the first issuers of green bonds in Indonesia, and we continue to be an enabler for these types of activities for mentoring, capacity building, and the like, in order to ensure that the development that continues is consistent with the green aspects that we have agreed on. In the next slide, I'll take a look at what we've done in 2020 during the pandemic, where much of the government, both regional government as well as corporations, have made various efforts, especially since they were impacted. Perhaps their fiscal capabilities were obstructed slightly because they had to reallocate some of their funds. which left few resources for sustainable development. What we do is we take money from the state budget and we loan that to the regional governments so that they can continue with the infrastructure developments that they need to, that have been impeded due to the pandemic. So we ensure that their programs can continue running and the fiscal impact to local governments from this pandemic are minimal. We have also assisted several corporations that have been affected by the pandemic, such as Garuda Indonesia, PTKI Indonesia, which is the train company, and others. We hope that through our efforts, we can continue to absorb labor and that these companies can continue to grow and that the national economy can be maintained at a good level. Next, we take a look at the green initiatives. We have a 5G system, so we have green principles, which means that the basis of our initiative for the sustainable initiatives or the green initiatives is based on some basic principles. And these are the basis for all of our activities, both financing and investment. It is easier then for us to be trusted by various parties. And then we have green funding, where we obtain funds, where in this case, we have green funding through green bonds. This was issued in 2018. And as the first issuer of green bonds in Indonesia, we had 500 billion. And investors saw that there was potential in this type of financing. There was high interest in this. And so we were able to achieve the targets that we had set. We also have discipline in the distribution of this and the reporting of the green bonds. From this funding, we have then developed green financing. So this is for infrastructure. This develops renewable energy products, which is hydro energy projects, biomass energy projects, as well as activities that help develop and finance energy efficiency projects for roads, for example, and there are other projects that we also support. Not only that, but we fully realize that in order to implement these green initiatives, we cannot stand alone and we cannot fulfill these needs. So we have engagement or partnership with other parties. And this is what we call green partnership. So we have a blended finance platform. And this invites all parties to take part and participate in green development in Indonesia. There are a number of donors, multilateral and bilateral organizations, philanthropy, as well as other sources of finance that are social and personal through private equity and so on, that are based on the blended finance that I mentioned earlier. So as part of the commitment for us to continue with this green development, we continue to be disciplined in our operations and we apply what we call green office, which is where we try to save on our operational costs through being aware of the electricity uses and the use of paper and other waste. So we want to be able to save on this in order to help with that. We have a commitment to continue to encourage a green office society. Next, here we're talking about the partnership. And this development must be done together.
We established the so-called SDG Indonesia 1, which is expected to be able to engage all stakeholders in building the infrastructures or support green growth in Indonesia. We have tried to design several facilities based on our experience that in order to initiate these green initiatives, first we'll need planning, which we call this as under one compartment, or which we call also as project development. And since when investment is coming in, we'll need to mitigate all the risks involved. In order to make sure that investment can run well and sustainable, we develop risk mitigation facilities. And once the risk has been mitigated, the project will be relatively more sustainable. So anytime commercial entities are coming in, we can invite more commercial financing and non-commercial one as well. Once the project has started to operate and attain stable cash flow, we'll provide incentive returns to the involved parties. And at that point, we can start launching the asset to the capital market so that we can develop a separate compartment, entitled equity compartment, which is a compartment for investment. An example of what we do in Indonesia 1 is that our main principle to conduct the blended finance partnership is to leverage. We want to make sure that each party can contribute, because we believe that by involving more parties, the leverage will become better and we will also create bigger impacts. And therefore, the principle of leveraging is something that we seriously apply. And secondly, we try to blend the participation jointly in accordance with respective appetite and regulations of each partners. And lastly, we always try to measure to which extent the investment conducted, by which we can monitor all the impacts of the projects, report the impacts as well, and perhaps this is one of our forms of transparency or accountability in our investment process. These are several examples of what we have implemented so far, including collaborating with philanthropic organizations for rebuilding disaster-affected areas such as Palu, where we built temporary shelters, as well as building slum areas, because we will definitely need support from the philanthropies and CSR to ensure that the operations of the area management can run sustainably. In addition, we also implement a program named Desa Bakti Negeri, in which we try to develop a village not only in terms of its infrastructures, but also to build inclusivity in terms of economic development. So we provide trainings, economic trainings, business training, as well as other incentives for the local community. But then when you have 2 more minutes, sir, I hope this would be my last point. This next aspect is socialization and promotion, with which we always which we always try to implement to reach out various stakeholders, both external, internal, domestic, and international ones. And I always also try to be active in publishing about this to create awareness of all relevant stakeholders. And finally, on last slide, we also conduct several activities, CSR activities, through community economic empowerment by using different support grants, which we take from our own sources, as well as in collaboration with other partners to build health and education facilities. These are some of the health facilities that we have supported for the outermost island in Indonesia, which is Morotai Island, by providing a mobile puskesmas or community health center in form of boat. And we also provided community empowerment programs in different regions that are situated close to our operational areas. So those are some parts of our initiatives and activities. I hope that you can develop further all these programs in the future. And that's all from me. Thank you, Ibu Beni. May the peace be upon all of us. Peace be upon you too, sir. Thank you, Pak Darwin. The word you keep uttering, multi-stakeholders. Since the first speaker, we know that he spoke first about inclusion of the bottommost level of society. We want all segments of society, including the bottom part, are also engaged in this green recovery or green economy. And now, SMI, with your bigger capacity of investment, which include green energy, and I believe we can take you as national pride, because now you have already received certification from GCF. Thank you for connecting again the topic to the goal of SDGs. After all, we are working under the bigger framework of Sustainable Development Goals. However, now let me bridge to the next speaker, Ibu Winnie. When we talk about how big the investment required and how big the construction that we should conduct, what would be the impacts of all these efforts to our economy and to our absorption of labor force? And therefore, our third speaker will be Deputy of Economic Affairs of the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, Ibu Amalia Widyasanti, PhD, or we usually call her as Ibu Winnie. She was appointed as Deputy of Economic Affairs in 2020, and she still serves at the same position until today. She also serves as the Senior Advisor to the Minister of Finance from 2018 to 2020. Ibu Widi started his career in Bappenas since 1999 in the Directorate of Industry, Trade and Tourism. She was also appointed as the chair of the Secretariat of the National Coordination Team for SDGs in 2018 until the end of 2020. She earned her PhD in Economic Affairs from the University of Melbourne, Australia. In 2005, she earned her PhD with the thesis of Inflation Targeting Frameworks in Emerging Economies. Her strong interest in macroeconomy, trade, and economic development, as well as economic modeling and analysis, has fostered her to have strong interest in research for policies as well as formulation of Indonesian economic policies. To Ibu Widi, without further ado, the floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you, Ibu Dini. Pak Fadli Zon, and Your Excellency, Ambassador of Germany to Indonesia. Distinguished panelists, we have Pak Darwin here, Pak Badril, Pak Saad as well, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon all of us. Good afternoon, and may the blessing of God and greeting of prosperity for all of us. Ibu Dini, please allow me to also mention apologies from the minister himself because he currently has to attend another meeting that is still ongoing up to date until now. And herewith I represent his presence for this event. I would like to share with you several messages that should have been delivered by him. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in the second slide, we can see that Indonesia has a target to become a developed country before 2045. In the document of Indonesian 2045 vision, one of our development pillars to achieve the 2045 targets is the sustainable economic growth and development. Sustainable economic development refers to one that does not only take into account the economic aspects but also the environmental and social aspects, which means we have to take into account economic, social, and environmental aspects and balance each other. In the next slide, our support to the Indonesian economic pillar, which take into account the environmental aspects, which we address now as green economy, has been incorporated explicitly into our midterm development plan 2020 until 2024, which states that one of our priorities, or priority 6, would be development of environment, strengthening our disaster resilience and climate change resilience. I believe our colleague can elaborate further on this. In addition to that, since the RPGM and our Midterm National Development Plan of 2020 to 2024 was passed, the government has set up exclusive targets on protecting our environment by balancing with our economic stability. So we should maintain our economic stability while improving environmental protection. To manifest the commitment since 2020 until 2024 in our midterm development plan, we have also set up certain development targets, which indicators include the reduction of greenhouse gas emission which we target to reduce by 27.3% by 2024. In the next slide, amidst our current COVID situation, it is undoubted that the pandemic has brought about negative impacts on our economy. Indonesia suffered from the recessions for the first time since 1998. In fact, as a consequence of COVID-19, there have been millions of Indonesian people who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And we can see that over the past few years, the number of Indonesian people who are unemployed had already decreased. However, in 2020, due to the pandemic, the number rose again. On the other hand, COVID-19 has reduced our emission due to the social restrictions, of course, and also the restriction of communities' activities. However, the emission reductions due to the COVID is definitely not sufficient to reduce climate change as a whole. We need to have more concerted and massive efforts so that after COVID has passed on, Indonesia will be able to retain our strong commitment and address all our challenges with regard to reduction of carbon emission and reduction of climate change. And we can also see that the world is going into a new trend also due to this pandemic, one of which is the trend towards green recovery. Various stimulus or recovery packages, especially for economic sector, conducted by other countries around the world, have already incorporated green recovery measures in their package. As an example, in Germany, for instance, they have allocated 30% of this total economic stimulus packages throughout the pandemic to reduce the emission by using green hydrogen fuel, providing incentive for electricity, vehicle, and public transport. France has allocated 30 billion euros for green recovery through incentive for bicycling, increase of efficiency of public buildings, as well as fostering industries to transition towards clean industry and greening the food sectors. South Korea has invested 138 trillion USD for the Korean New Deal that covers the efforts to foster production, a greener production in industries such as green vehicle and others. So that is the current trend our world is witnessing today, which means that for Indonesia, economic recovery and economic transformation will be needed and is getting better. But of course, the economic transformation that we are carrying out should be adjusted and adapted to our future challenges, and therefore, moving forward, the economic transformation that we should conduct will be the green economic transformation, one that is more sustainable and one that focuses on green economic and green investment aspects, so that we will become more productive and become able to create better opportunities for our economies. Next slide, please. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned by Mbak Dini earlier, green recovery is not about removing or destroying jobs and not only about preventing global climate change. Instead, it gives us an opportunity to create new employment and new sort of investment. So basically, the reality shows that green recovery will create more employment and economic growth. And a research actually has suggested that renewable technologies will create 75 new jobs for every investment amounting 10 million USDs. In the meantime, we can also have a look at another research that suggested that investment in renewable energy might create 5 more jobs compared to one in conventional energy. In the next slide, this is an exercise conducted by Pak Medril's office. Bappenas simulation herein shows that new and renewable energy activities and peatland restoration activities can create 103,000 new jobs every year. On the left side, you can see that when we look at the employment in coal sector per megawatt, it will only generate 1 new job. But when we compare this with solar energy investment, each 1 megawatt will generate 10 new jobs. When we look at the extractive energy infrastructures, it created indeed 87 million jobs, but greener sector will create 191 million jobs. This indicates to us that green economy and green recovery are not a barrier for future employment creation, but instead both green economy and recovery are an opportunity for our economy to become more productive, more sustainable, and an opportunity for us to create new jobs. As in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to pass on the message from the minister himself that green investment must keep being fostered to serve as a catalyst to create a greener Indonesian economy. However, the highlight here is that collaboration and synergy between stakeholders will become key for us to achieve our goals of achieving green Indonesia, and therefore we would like to see more pioneers in green economy that can emerge and be given stimulus in accordance with their respective expertise. And therefore, let us do our best in our respective field for greener Indonesia in the future. That concludes my remarks, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attention. Peace be upon all of you. Peace be upon all of you too, ma'am. I see optimism here. You hope to create 103,000 jobs, which sounds very excellent. But what kind of other investment do you think that is still possible to be granted to the environment sector, as well as especially the human resources, so that we can capture that opportunity? But before we discuss further, let us now listen to the presentation from the last speaker, the Director of the Environment Sector of the Bappenas, Bapak Insinyur Medrilzam, PhD. Pak Medrilzam currently serves as the Director of the Environment Affairs of Bappenas. He earned his PhD in Environmental Management from the School of Geography, Planning and Environmental Management in the University of Queensland, Australia. Pak Medrilzam has been actively serving in Bappenas since 1990s. In 2020, he made his mark as the best graduate of the National Leadership Training of Level 2 of the LAN National Administration Agency. He also actively publishes scientific writings or works with more than 20 works. To Bapak Medrilzam, the floor is yours. Very well, thank you very much, Ibu Dini. Allow me to greet all of you. Thank you to IAP for inviting us, Bappenas, which include our Minister, Ibu Widi, and myself. Good afternoon to Pak Fadli, Ibu Widi, Pak Saat, Pak Darwin, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Peace be upon all of you. Peace be upon you too, sir. I would like now to start my presentation in this very good opportunity by reviewing a little bit about what has been mentioned by His Excellency Ambassador and Ibu Widi about Build Back Better, because I believe that many of us still have different understanding on this concept. Build Back Better in the context of post-crisis green recovery is a concept that is not literally a new concept, but it's been around for some time, that has been mentioned in Sendai framework and has been adopted by all countries who are member to Sendai framework. And actually this concept in principle aims to prevent the emergence of same vulnerability that had occurred before the crisis. And we have already undergone through various crises, including a pandemic. So what we want is to build back better. So we have to reduce our vulnerability level compared to the pre-crisis, and therefore we need to conduct a lot of efforts towards recovery as well as towards better transformation that cover various aspects, including social and of course especially the economic and environmental aspects. When we look at the crisis context, as Bu Widi mentioned earlier, our past experiences showed that when countries paid significant concern or attention on fiscal stimulus for green recovery, some countries showed, such as Korea and China and others, after the 1998 crisis, it turned out that they managed to enjoy much higher and faster acceleration process compared to other countries that did not provide fiscal stimulus that were sufficient during the recovery. And therefore, I think it's just about time for us that throughout our recovery process, we need to talk about green recovery and applying this concept of Build Back Better as our tagline that we should push forward seriously, so that by the time we come to the post-COVID era, we can become better and have undergone various transformation processes, especially in the economic sector, towards low carbon economy. I have taken here several global recommendations about what should be prioritized in the allocation and the use of stimulus, especially to foster green recovery during our recovery period. The first one is accelerating transition towards low carbon and inclusive economy, and one that is fair and resilient as well. Another crucial keyword here that we need to consider, especially for our future economic transformation, is the transformation toward renewable energy, and especially increasing our energy mix, which includes the renewable energy. And as the ambassador said, energy efficiency will become very crucial in the future, because as we know, we are quite wasting a lot of energy all this time. I have recently conducted several strategic studies on food, and it turns out that we really waste a lot of our food. We generated a lot of food loss and food waste, and we have to improve our efficiency, including by increasing the clean energy mix. And of course, we need to promote cleaner and healthier mobility through, for instance, electric vehicle, and also fostering infrastructure transformation and low carbon building. We need to also promote transition of industrial sector toward lower carbon industries, and this will be related very much to resource efficiency, especially to reduce our natural resources exploitation. Furthermore, we need to also foster green investment to address climate change. What do we define? What do we call as green jobs actually? We have already taken several definitions, and one definition that we can, I hope, agree on together, taken from ILO. According to ILO, this matter is divided into two aspects. The first one is output, which should generate green products and services, as well as green processes. As Ibu Widi and the ambassador said in the beginning, we have to also prepare for the transition from the brown jobs towards green jobs. There must be some job loss in the brown job sector, but there will be a lot of new jobs coming up from the new green jobs. From this study, we can see here clearly that if the world is committed to foster green economy, we will generate 24 millions of new jobs by 2030 from 163 sectors. Only 4 sectors that will suffer from job loss. But compared to the total new employment created, the loss is incomparable or insignificant. We can see here the graph. There will be some job loss in oil refinery or oil extraction, but there will be more and more new jobs created if we support green economy. Green jobs will be created through hydropower, agriculture, and so on. And Buidi said earlier, our exercise on peatland has shown that even from peatland restoration alone, it has generated hundreds of thousands of new jobs. Investment-wise, we have also conducted exercise last year, and for low carbon development as mandated by the Midterm Development Plan Priority 6, Priority Program 2, there is an average need annually amounting 306 trillion rupiahs, including to reduce the emission by 29% until 2030. The total of these needs are divided into 72 trillions per year should be given by the government, while the rest should come from the business sector. It's impossible for the government to tackle this issue alone. Even the government itself still shows some gaps that we cannot satisfy yet due to the state's economic situation now. Based on our exercise, we found out that there is only 24% of the proportion of funding coming from the government, and there is a huge need of amounting 76% of funding from non-government sources that we need to find further.
So we're currently trying to do an exercise on green recovery, in which specifically for a few sectors related to renewable energy, there is an extra push so that we have significant green recovery, specifically in renewable energy. There are 3 main targets, which is how we accelerate the quality of documents to develop renewable energy projects. And hopefully this will help them, especially in securing loans for renewable energy projects. And for concrete efforts, we hope to have funding for rooftop solar panels. Now, economically, this will create a multiplier effect for the local economies, which can create up to 1 million new jobs. And we can reduce greenhouse gases to over 204,000 tons of CO2 per year. Another effort that we are trying to make sure occurs is green recovery with Build Back Better with low carbon development, with efforts to ensure peatland restoration, as well as mangrove restoration. And we hope that this will create more jobs. We are currently designing how we can rejuvenate or revitalize agriculture with regard to large plantations. We know that we have low productivity due to older plants or crops. So we're heading in that direction. And we hope that this will be a new injection of energy into these sectors so that we can transition them from the current economic condition to an economic transformation, We also have economic activities in agriculture that are sufficiently significant in terms of their results. We are now currently helping a circular economy. So we just launched this last week. There was a document on how large the economic, social, and environmental impacts were if we would only implement a circular economy. We usually think of 3 R's, but here we have 5 R's. We're not only talking about trash, but we're also talking about resource efficiency. So we're talking about upstream to downstream. So I mentioned that I have an assessment on food loss and waste. If we could simply save approximately 20% of the food loss and waste that we currently have, then maybe Indonesia wouldn't have a hunger problem. We are very wasteful when it comes to production as well as consumption of different agricultural crops. So in the economic context, we would like to encourage and prioritize the circular economy, and this can help improve the GDP as well. It could even raise it up to 600 trillion. And we could create 4.4 million green jobs. So this is significant, and it's also significant in reducing waste and greenhouse gases. So you have 2 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. When I start telling stories, I just keep going on and on. So this is the last slide that I'll show you. We have some very simple activities. We simply provide incentives to cooperatives, such as this one in Belitung. So this used to be a tin mining area. They would throw the waste here. This is usually where they say the jinn throw away children. But this is clearly a very scary area. And we have tried to make certain efforts to provide incentives to the community in that area. And in that, we were able to rehabilitate the area, to have mangroves in that area, and the incentives that we provided, it's only about 2 billion rupiah. And this was able to generate or leverage other investments. And we also were able to increase the income of ecotourism workers there in that area. We also see that we helped with mangrove rehabilitation up to 50 hectares. So this covered this helped provide jobs for 164 people there. So with an incentive of this much money of 2 billion, we were able to go back to an era where they were able to benefit from the land. So ladies and gentlemen, if you go to Belitung, the Belitung Mangrove Park, this is even better than the Laskar Pelangi shooting site. I'm sure some of you have seen Laskar Pelangi and might be bored of it now, but you can come to this mangrove park. You have this ship in the middle of the water there. There's a lot of different things. I'm not promoting a tourist site, but I'm just saying that this is something that we can do, that these green investment, green recovery efforts are very helpful, and they generate real results. So in our opinion, there are certain prime movers to mobilize the investment for green recovery and green economies. First, we need to have an enabling environment. This means that we need to have comprehensive policies, as mentioned earlier, on renewable energies, with new schemes on financing for the private sector so that they can get in there. We also need to have pilot projects or activities, because we're still learning by doing. This is not really a problem. With all of this piloting, this means that we're gathering many experiences to improve these processes for better implementation in the future. And of course, this creates a multiplier effect. And it's not just about emissions and things like that, but it's also about resource efficiency, so that our natural resources in future can still be improved. I think that's all, Ms. Dini, from me. I would now give you the floor. Wassalamualaikum, peace be with everyone. Walaikum salam, peace be with you as well. Wow, this is really exciting, sir. I think that if we were able to talk about this to your satisfaction, we'd be here until Maghrib or sunset. So here we have insights, plans from the government, from private sector. These presentations are very high quality. So now we're going into the fun part, right? I see that there are at least 42 here, these messages here. And we have people from Riau, from Sumatra, from East Java, from East Nusa Tenggara as well, from NTT. And we have people from an NGO in education and children and youth. I think about, how can the youth make use of this? What contribution would they be able to have to this green economy in Indonesia? So I'm glad to see that there is a question from an educator, Mr. Benny, and we have Maya Angeli Serang. So here we have a question from East Java. I'll just read it out. He asked Ms. Amalia, but also, of course, for users who are here, I think it's also relevant. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, many companies laid people off. This is part of the cost efficiency in their company. So now we have many people here who have graduated from university or vocational schools, and they're ready to enter the work world. However, they're unable to get a job. So this is a serious question when we want to develop the economy even further. So what are the efforts on the part of your organizations to provide jobs for these individuals and to ensure that the people who are ready to work are absorbed into the workforce? How do we provide them with these green job opportunities? What do academics need to do in order to support the success of labor absorption in green recovery? This is one of the questions, and we have a similar question from Maria Angelina from East Nusa Tenggara on green economy and the creation of jobs in Indonesia, specifically in East Indonesia, like in East Nusa Tenggara or NTT. What are the plans for areas like NTT? Of course, they would be different from those of Java, right? So maybe Mr. Medrilzam, you'd like to share first. Can you answer this question? Yes, thank you. I received a message from Ms. Widi as she was asked to be here with the minister, but it's so she's with the minister, so I'm here to cover her part. Now, it's very interesting. What is the relation to our youth? This is a very interesting question, and I'm very much inspired by the youth here all over the world. I'm sure Ms. Dini, all of you, you all know, you've all heard of Greta Thunberg. So she's only 18. And it is youth like her that will be our asset in the future, especially in Indonesia, to become a better country than we are today. So how can we ensure that these youth have the same concerns on green economy, low carbon, etc.? Now, the thing is, they're the ones who are going to experience what the world will be like if we don't pay attention to these issues. It is today's youth who will experience the impacts of our activities today. In terms of education, whether we like it or not, content that is related to climate change issues, biodiversity issues, natural resource issues, all of these should be a comprehensive part of our studies, not only in education, in school, but also in daily life. I remember very well when I talked to experts in education and talking to people who were involved in environment and climate change, I realized that our education stands in a silo. Whenever it looks at an issue, it looks at it as part of a silo. We have mathematics, we have natural sciences, we have social sciences. But when we're taking a look at an issue in real life, the approaches are then not comprehensive. So it's not seen as a system. But we see that abroad, starting from a young age, children are taught through the education system in elementary schools. This is already taught in foreign countries. They are taught to take a look at a problem from different angles to find an integrated or systemic solution. And I see that, of course, our education system is very good, but there are many things that we need to improve. And I'd like to underline that in the future, I hope that we can take a look at various issues or problems as part of a system, because we need to understand very well that everything is integrated. One thing is integrated with other things. There must be a root of the problem, and it's all related. If we don't take a look at it in a comprehensive manner, and if that doesn't start from our education system at a young age, that we need to resolve problems in a systemic and comprehensive manner. If they don't have this understanding, then it's difficult. If they do have it, then our efforts in supporting green economy, low carbon economy, and so on, will be better in the hands of our youth in the future. When we're talking about green economy, low carbon economy, and so on, of course we're talking about a system, right? It's not partial. I think that these are basic things that we need to pay attention to in our education system. Now, second, with regard to green jobs in Eastern Indonesia, if we're talking about green jobs in Eastern Indonesia, I could talk a lot, especially when we're talking about renewable energy, forestry. I think that this is a source of huge potential. And those in the Ministry of Energy as well are designing something, I believe, because there are great energy sources in East Nusa Tenggara, in NTT, in Labuan Bajo. This will be significant because it will help provide green jobs for the provision of renewable energy in those areas. I think that this is one potential for green jobs that we can take a look at. I think that's all, Ms. Dini. Thank you, Mr. Medrilzam. Yes, this is very interesting. So let's listen to Mr. Darwin. All right, thank you, Ms. Dini. This is a very interesting question, and this is difficult for me as well. I hope that I'll be able to answer it well. If I take a look at what was said by Mr. Beni and Mr. Medrilzam, it's very comprehensive. And from our experiences in dealing with colleagues or friends who have just entered the work world, and how they interact with the academic world before that, we need to continue to look at the developments on the ground. At their age, maybe they've just completed their education, so we call them millennials and so on. I think that they're a more challenge-oriented spirit. So their entrepreneurship skill is much more apparent than from our period. And from the education sector, we need to try to direct them more in that direction. In our opinion, what's important as well is that these people, the youth, should have basic skills that they need when they're in the work world or when they're entrepreneurs. So I think that Mr. Medrilzam has already mentioned this, that we need to think in an integrated manner when we approach things. We also need to take a look at how they present ideas. Their courage, as I mentioned earlier, is much higher than people in our era. They have immense confidence in themselves, and so we need to equip them with the ability to present their ideas so that their ideas can be well received by the industry, as well as people who might support those initiatives. So we need to help them with developing these skills, for example, in developing engagement with stakeholders, and how they can continue to feel comfortable in research and management and other things. So this should be adjusted to their appetite for these industrial sectors. In green development in Eastern Indonesia, God willing, in our experience, we have much engagement or interaction with people in that region. And in future, I think that the business model will change. Right now, we see that the energy industry is still centralized to several companies. But in the future, customers can be producers as well. So, for example, if you have a small power plant, for example, if you have solar panels, you can actually share this with other people. So you can share this with other customers. And so they can become producers. This idea has been developed in several countries. And the issue now here is how do you regulate that to make sure that it's possible? So for economic inclusion, this could develop further in Eastern Indonesia with such a system. Thank you, Ms. Dini. That's all from us. Thank you. And Mr. Saad Suharto, do you have a lot of engagement to the grassroots level, right? I think that this question is very relevant for those at the grassroots level. So I think the more relevant question to me is Mr. Benny's question with regard to COVID, especially since I'm in finance. So there is one disadvantage for policymakers in finance. So we have procycling. So in situations of a crisis like this, everyone is holding back on financing. But it's precisely in these kinds of situations that we have alternative model that in this situation we need to stay safe in terms of their business, but we also need to penetrate the market in a way that's better. So for BMT, for large financing, let's say it's over 100 million, we're holding back on all of those. We do not provide large financing like that at this time. However, for those under 20 million, that has increased. And that's quite a significant increase as well. So the average financing of BMT is quite high in that sector. During the phases of the pandemic, after Ramadan, we increased that. And the trend continues based on the NPF position that we have. So we're able to maintain it very well. And the average financing is about 4 months. Now, on the other hand, as an alternative financial institution, we do have one weakness in terms of financing. So banks are a financial institution, and usually they only finance growing or sustainable companies. For those who are still being initiated, who are in the beginning stages, they hold back. But thankfully, for those businesses that we already know, we continue to finance them. It could be people who are fresh graduates or others who have initiated new businesses, especially in IT. We have provided significant financing to them. And in Jakarta, we consider it as something like we're providing someone food. So we provide food to those at the lower levels of society. This is an application that has been purchased by a philanthropic organization. So we have another initiative called Jabul, which is an ambulance network. And they took this initiative and they sold it. So these are all for philanthropic organizations. These kinds of initiatives can be developed. Thank you, Ms. Dini. I hope that answered that question. All right, sir, that's very interesting. So all parties can participate independently in moving their own communities so that they can help each other in our economic recovery. And this is economic recovery based on green economy. So for these three speakers, we have one last question. So we see that there's great opportunity here, but there's also a large amount of investment required. So we always say, in the end, it comes down to money. But in the end, it also comes down to people, right? If we have the money, we have the investment, but the mindset hasn't changed, that would be difficult, right? If the technical capabilities haven't changed, that would be difficult. So that's all about investment as well. On the other hand, when we make a policy or investment decisions, there are other interests, other sectors, including those that are conventional. So how would the government, maybe Mr. Medrilzam can talk about this, how would the government show its commitment to the development of green economy? How do you ensure that we can actually contribute to the achievement of SDGs in 2030? And for SMEs, maybe Mr. Darwin, you can tell us about PTSME itself and how it involves different parties at the local government level. I'm sure that you work with the local government. So how do you have this influencing effort for green energy so that it can be even bigger? And Mr. Saad Suharto, last, how do you ensure that, with farmers or small retailers, how can they continue in their business? Because they might think, every day is different. They tell us to save and all of this. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, if I can eat, then I'm already thankful. So when we're talking about green economy, how does that work when, they don't even satisfy their own stomachs? I know that time is limited, so please, let's go straight into it. All right, so I think you answered some of it because we need a change in mindset, right? So Ms. Dini, this cannot all be achieved in one day, of course. It requires a process, and it's a lengthy process. But we need to start on it. We can't not start it. We need to start on it, and we need to accelerate it. So now we know the concept of change from brown to green economies. And this is a transition that we need to implement. We can't say, okay, we want a green economy and suddenly tomorrow everything's green. That's not possible. So in terms of renewable energy, we already have policies on this. This isn't new, but the development of it is so slow. But now the president has said that we need to make leaps into the future. And in this pandemic, of course, there are many negatives, but if we take a look at the positive side of this pandemic, we need to take a look inward, and we need to be ready to make those leaps and bounds, to make sure that it's a momentum for change that doesn't just change, but change that is significant, such as with green recovery, from brown to green, as mentioned earlier. Now, many measures have been designed to ensure that we make these leaps. But of course, we can't do that in one day. It still requires time. It still requires a transition period. So we have just transitions. That's the cool global term for it. Because we can't just have, mining and oil suddenly be unemployed. We need to prepare them fully in providing them with reskilling that needs to be prepared and improved. And we need to anticipate as well the renewable energies. This is a great potential for us. Also in other sectors, such as the circular economy. There's a lot that we can do there. And once more, we need to think about this comprehensively, not in a partial manner. So we need to take a look at this from this as a system, and our youth is thinking about this as well. And the government is encouraging us to think about it in a system, as a system, in a comprehensive manner. And many of these aspects are those that we are working together from the academics, from science, from the government, from the local level. So we have many different parties that are supporting this. And there are many topics under this webinar. We can't have people working in silos. We need to work collaboratively, taking a look at the competencies of each. So we're not competing with each other, but we're trying to find synergy to reach the targets that we have envisioned, specifically for economic transition, for a green and low carbon economy. So again, this transition is a transition, but we don't want it to take too long of a time because we don't want to forget about it. We need to try to accelerate it by focusing on the momentum created by this crisis. All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Darwin? Yes, Ms. Dini. So on your question regarding our role to encourage this and to realize green economy, first we'd like to take a look at what is the strength of PT SMI, especially with investment. So we take a look at the capital investment. But it is not sufficient because from the start, we are unable to identify a commitment in that area. So for me, the process is first awareness. Awareness needs to be encouraged very fiercely so that people will understand what needs to be done. Because these green efforts require great commitment and consistency. Now, when we have awareness and when this has been developed and people want to develop this, then we need to improve the skills capacity. And this is with capacity building programs and things like that. So God willing, with this kind of capacity building, then it will simply be about how they implement it, how they implement the knowledge and the understanding that they have obtained. And then that would mean that they go straight into a project model. In order for them to jump headfirst in there, we need to provide them with mentoring. So with mentoring, they would be able to prepare all of the needs of the programs very well, the documentation, the feasibility study, the environmental impact study, and so on. Then other institutions, financial institutions, can take a look at this as well. And so we develop a business model, and it's just about talking to parties who should be involved. So they can invite parties that can be involved, such as investors, local government, individuals, and so on, so that they can contribute in these programs, and they can provide them with greater access to funding. And with this source of funding, we can see that the implementation could be more consistent. In my opinion, it is this sequence that must be developed, and from this company, this is our approach. So we're not just stopping at financing, because this is only part of it. But it is an important part. We need to have commitment, we need to have capacity building, we need to prepare the appropriate documentation, we need to have engagement with all parties, and this will all support development. So here we have awareness, and we have the engagement of parties who are well versed in this topic. And Mr. Suharso? So with regard to the change in mindset, we need to take a look at our roles and the mindset of our members. We talked about savings, and savings is a tool to change mindset. So this is not a product, but with savings, their mentality as being helpless can be eliminated. in our experience, let's start from the beginning. For me, in 1992, this was a time when cash savings was difficult. Even that was difficult. But from being someone who does not have this culture of saving, we can then develop a culture of savings, and they can see in such situations like we're facing today that savings are something they need, and it is something that can help them in resolving their problems. But this is a movement on its own. There are broader implications to this that includes the need for an institution that can provide access to savings and financing. So we're talking about different products that are more in line with what they need. So the savings could be provided without administration fees. So we have to take a look at how they can save if their money continues to decrease every month because there are fees. So we need to have an institution that can provide them with the appropriate access in line with their abilities. All right, thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers. So I think that if we summarize it, it would be very long because there's so many things that we discussed. But the key word that I can take from all of this is the role of all parties to develop green economies in Indonesia is necessary. The road is still long, however, and we need to develop the human resources for this from all parties, from all ministries, the private sector, the public sector, and all of the Indonesian people, that we all need to be involved. And IAP2 also has a big role to facilitate these kinds of multi-stakeholder discussions. And this will help as well if we include different ministries, such as the Ministry of Education, of Health, of Labor. We need to ensure that they're all involved to help in developing a green economy in Indonesia. Mr. Medrilzan, greetings to your wife. Please give her my best. Mr. Darwin, thank you. Mr. Saad Suharto as well, thank you. So now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Sasti. Thank you, Ms. Dini Widyastuti, and for all of the participants who have said in the chat that this was a very interesting discussion. So I hope that through this discussion, we can find a way to easily implement these efforts in the society. So ladies and gentlemen, after all of this discussion, based on the webinar today, we will now go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the closing remarks from the chair of IAP2, Mr. Aldi Muhammad Alizar. Please, the floor is yours. Assalamualaikum, peace be with you all. Greetings to all of you. I hope we are all in good health. Thank you for this opportunity. I can't believe that we're already at the end of this event, so I'll be very brief due to the limited time. This webinar was implemented as well based on various discussions, small discussions from December and January. So from these several discussions, we have several points that we need to make note of. The public participation in low carbon economy has been mentioned. We still have issues in diversification, or we should say challenges. One of them is because at this time, green economy, or this issue in general, at the national level, still bears the stigma of being a global idea. And so from the lower levels of society, there is an issue with this. So we're trying to localize the idea of a low carbon economy so that it can be more in line with the local residents here. We also need to have participation in a systematic, structured way, and we need to ensure that we have the resources necessary. For public participation in low carbon development, this is more meaningful with capacity building and legitimization from the stakeholders who represent the society. From the context of the importance of monitoring and evaluation being integrated in development, we see that monitoring and evaluation from these greenhouse gases needs to be monitored. And we need to have a monitoring platform, an evaluation platform, that can reach even the lowest levels of society so that we can replicate this and we can push this idea to various stakeholders when we're trying to promote low carbon development. We also need to have coordination with organizations or agencies in various sectors, such as the Global Green Sukuk and others. The role of the Indonesian government in optimizing these efforts is something that needs to be explained to all parties so that they can all understand and implement their roles well. We also need to have a framework, an institutional framework, and so on, for the technology and the knowledge framework that can be prepared and even better than before. And we also need to have knowledge-based capital with green companies so that companies can weigh the different frameworks and take a look at the benefits. We also need to encourage sustainable businesses. From the speakers here, who are extraordinary, Mr. Suharso Monoarfa is not here today, but said that green recovery through various loans and tax incentives and so on needs to be supported, and this will have a positive impact as it will be a catalyst for investment and job creation as well as technology. Fadli Zone as well stated that sustainable development and low carbon development should be scientifically based and implemented in various sectors. And Ms. Alia also said that we need to build back better. So here, this is an economic redesign as well. So we need to make it better and sustainable. And Mr. Medrilzam said that mobilization of low carbon investments needed to be done. And there are three factors, which is an enabling environment. And we also need to have pilot projects. And we need to use resources efficiently in creating a multiplier effect. So he said, or he had the impression that businesses that focused on the poor are stronger and more resilient because they are indeed adjusted to the needs and the cultures of that community. So that's what we got from the speakers. So that's the summary for me. And then from our understanding, my understanding and the understanding of those at IAP2, from 2020 to 2024, the government of Indonesia has a commitment to the 7th phase of low carbon development. And this is in the medium-term national development plan. And this is part of that plan, and if we can improve it and do this better, then in the 8th phase, until 2030, this can be reached much better. So I can't believe that 10 years has already passed by. Of course, this is a process that we need to keep going through with. Now we have green engagement as well. So with green engagement, we see that the urgency of public participation in this is even larger. We see that organizations have shown their commitment, and this includes the government and various parties. We have a spectrum of public engagement and participation, and this has been implemented in various countries. So we have informed consult and collaborative power. Informed is where we inform people of various things, like what we're doing now, and then we have the spectrum for consult. So this is for consultations, to consult on various decisions that are or will be taken. And then we have involved, which is where we involve the society in making decisions and collaborating in various efforts to make decisions. And finally, we have empower, which is to give them the authority or the power to make decisions. So taking a look at these spectrums, our expectation is that the quality of green investment, green economy, and green jobs will be of higher quality, meaning what was mentioned earlier by the speakers. We hope that in implementation, that will be more purposeful. So there will be an objective, it will be transformative, and when we're talking about transformation, that can be accelerated. We also hope it can be inclusive, so it's always supported by various parties, and proactive, so that we are not reactive, we are more proactive in the green engagement in the future, which will start in February this year. And we hope that this green engagement will be complementary and will help bind together all of the efforts in green economy among all of the investors. And so this is all part of the low carbon development efforts, and we are here to support the government in green engagement, especially considering the complexities of the economic conditions at this time. And with these complexities, and for Indonesia, we hope that there will be collaboration, and we have low carbon as part of this with green engagement. And we hope that this will help with the process in Indonesia in the future. And so I'm very thankful for this event. So for Mr. Suharso Monoarfa and Mr. Peter Schoof, as well as from BKSAP, and all of the wonderful speakers, for for the Director of Environment in Bappenas, Mr. Saat, and Mr. Darwin, from the Financial Director and the Operations of Multi-Infrastructure, and for the MC, and the moderator as well. This is part of the collaboration that we have for our IAP2. And Ms. Dini as well as the executive of this. And from IAP2, Mr. Wahyu and all of the others, and those supporting us. Thank you. Without your assistance, we would not be able to do this. And in accordance with your suggestions, we are currently making a policy paper and we are very enthusiastic about developing this and future initiatives as well. I apologize if there have been any shortcomings on our end. We hope that this pandemic will finish quickly. That's all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be with you all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aldi Muhammad Alizar. So I've noted the important points, which is through green engagement for IAP2. We are here trying to create green economy, green investment, and in the end, green jobs. So with the closing remarks, this ends this webinar with multiple stakeholders for the absorption of labor in the framework of green recovery. Thank you to Ms. Moderator, Ms. Dini, as a key role in this webinar. Thank you for the speakers, as well as the participants who have joined us all throughout this afternoon. So for IAP2 and our partners, thank you for this green investment process. Thank you for the green recovery labor absorption efforts. We'd like you to try to help us by filling out the survey that you can see in the chat box. So please click on chat and you can see that. There are activities from the IAP2 in the future, and you can see these activities through our social media. We have IAP2 Indonesia on Instagram. We also have IAP2_Indonesia. And on Facebook, we have IAP2 Indonesia. And our website, it is iap2indonesia.org.id. So thank you. I am Dayu Prasasti. We apologize if there are any shortcomings throughout this webinar. I hope that we can see you at the next IAP2 event. Thank you.
Selamat sore.